to part 3 of the Mothman's Photographer field observation document. I just thought I would catch up a little bit here before we start part 3. It's September 27th, 2003. Here in the in this segment of the series, we delve into some of the recent and original Mothman witnesses that we meet at the Mothman Festival 2003, which took place in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. We also meet with John Keel, interview him, and explore other aspects of the Mothman phenomenon. Here we have, let's start off with this wonderful book by Jim Keith, Saucers of the Illuminati. Jim Keith was mysteriously died while on the operating table for a minor knee surgery at Burning Man a few years ago, not long after the release of this book. One of the things that caught my eye in this last chapter, which is really a talk that he gave in 1995 or 6, he talks about the Ray alien cult, which we talked about in part 1. States that the founder of the cult had a UFO sighting. He saw the Star of David with a swastika inside as the emblem of this UFO. And I guess that is now the motif for the symbol of this cult. According to Keith, there are a lot of New World Order Illuminati references within the Vorhayon, Claude Vorhayon, the founder, within his UFO encounter and the mission that he was given from the aliens that he met. Keith even goes so far as to say that this alien might as well have been on a mission from George Bush, because there are so many New World Order type aspects to this cult. Speaking of George Bush, in segment 3 we visit his childhood home in Ohio, near the Mothman area. And strangely enough, it's right after we visited, within just a couple of days, we have a sighting of a huge UFO in the same township, quite near, in the same county of the Bush family estate. What else do we have here? In the Saucers book, Keith notes that there are a lot of sightings that have been seen with the eye in the triangle emblem, and other Masonic emblems, and goes so far as to say that he strongly suggests, his research strongly suggests that there's a Freemasonic mystery religion, Illuminati motivation and or manipulation occurring within the UFO phenomenon. Both American and British intelligence agencies are still much aligned to Freemasonry, and so this might point out an intelligence agency connection, say in terms of staged incidents, mind control, or whatever. That's the argument that he makes in the Saucers of the Illuminati. There is the possibility that since Freemasons and their ilk are quite involved in ritualism and magic, that this might be a straight magical transmission, evoking these UFO events, and even influencing them from a non-physical standpoint. These events may be summoned by Illuminati ritual. For instance, at Bohemian Grove, some of these rituals might be to evoke certain happenings, events, tragedies, terrorism, whatever, things that would play into the ultimate goal of the UFOs and aliens and otherworldly entities. At the very least, Keith suggests that these symbols might have crept into the common subconscious from which position they are dramatized in reality. Again, Keith says, I am not suggesting that incidents like these are examples of delusion, but that we may be looking at something quite different, which is that the content of the mind can influence and shape the manifestation of real events. Just what we've been saying in the Mothman's Photographer. Just what we've been saying in this series. Another clue suggesting the UFO experience draws part of its meaning from the human experience or the subconscious, or mass consciousness, is that one can see that one of the major concerns of this era is and should be the interface of human consciousness with outer space. We have finally evolved tools, that is rockets and other modes, for travel among the planets, and are getting to the point where the creation of a faster than light drive is possible. We may be pondering upon these things, upon this position in time, and the possibilities inherent in it, and these experiences with spacelings may in part depend upon and be flavored by our focus of attention, but also possibly because we have not yet objectified our experience of outer space. We have not solidified our beliefs and views or standardized our interpretation of the possibilities of this experience. UFOs may wholly or partly constitute an imagining into future possibilities, perhaps a testing out of realities that we are going to put on or manifest in the future. A trial run in a new pair of shoes. Maybe like the Rorschach test, space is relatively amorphous to us at the moment. In our present perception, a somewhat neutral oracle that we are reading meanings into, that we are beginning to play with. Keith goes on to say, I suspect, although since I have not conducted the experiment, I cannot prove it, but there are major correlations between the type of UFO encounter one has and one's chronic emotional tone, i.e. anger, apathy, grief, whatever. One's obsessions, philosophy, and material circumstances play into it. Keith says, I am not saying that these non-human contacts with humans are sometimes not real. I am saying that we tend to attract experiences that correlate with our mind and emotional sets, and that we ultimately create our own reality, including traffic jams, bad TV shows, toothaches, trips to the corner groceries, being a human on planet Earth, and having our mind blown by an ET encounter. Keith goes on to say that he thinks we are God playing at being human until we realize the fact and decide to consciously play at something different. Another point that Keith makes is that the alien face is so simplistic that it's like the simplest sets you could use to make up a face, which means that what happens in a UFO encounter is so beyond the mind's ability to imagine that we end up just using the simplest sets we can to remember the face of what we try to remember, which reminds me of an interesting Buddhist kind of idea, which is that when our mind is giving very little to go on, it creates a lot of details. However, when it's stifled with way too many details, it goes the opposite way and fantasizes. And in fact, sees nothing or imagines nothing. There are purposeful destructurings of the field of information into random images, rendering the field itself amorphous and virtually meaningless, so that meaning can manifest, ready to deliver messages that are not otherwise available to the conscious mind. Ultimately, Keith says, I believe that there really is no universe, no field as it were, and no past and future, no time. I believe that we create the past to justify the present, and that we can create the past in any form we want. You create your own reality. And now for a little Iraq War update. We have the National Geographic this month. We have image of winged birdmen in Iraq. What was once ancient Sumeria. This Sumerian legends talk of these giants who came from outer space and mated with humans who were more primitive at that time. That's how a lot of the great pyramids and things were built. According to the Sumerians, we mated with aliens. And that's why these clay tablets in Iraq that have been destroyed are so important, because these are the oldest known records, written records of mankind. And they do have this explanation of these huge Birdmen. Could Mothman be one of these ancient Sumerians, still manifesting somehow through time and space? If you want to read more on this topic, here's a good book, Rule by Secrecy by Jim Marrs. The hidden history that connects the Trilateral Commission, the Freemasons, and the Great Pyramids actually talks quite a bit about Sumeria and the different legends and the gold that was being mined. I guess, you know, one of the things I have in the National Geographic is this recently discovered gold in Iraq. The Nimrod is the name of one of the great, one of the original two Anunnaki, or however you pronounce it, these ancient Sumerian gods. Nimrod was one of them. And like I say, there were these huge, 9 feet tall birdmen who flew around. Obviously, they were able to get around the planet quite a bit. Maybe these are the bones that have been talked about that were found near Point Pleasant in the 1800s. This is something that I just found out about at the Mothman Festival, that at one time, many of these large skeletons, like 9 feet tall, were found in a huge cave system that's underneath Point Pleasant. The Smithsonian came, took the skeletons away, and have basically covered the story up. No one quite knows why. But it is interesting to note that in one of John Keel's talks from the 80s, he talks about the Smithsonian being linked to some UFO abductions. People were remembering that it was Smithsonian trucks that came by to abduct them, not UFOs, or Smithsonian trucks coming around with men in black in them after UFO contacts. Also in this segment, we visit the Serpent Mound in Ohio and discuss theories that, my theory at least, that this was a staging ground for Mothman, a place for him to land and pick up souls. You can almost imagine this. Here we go. You can almost imagine Mothman here flying down and grabbing this serpent, picking it up and taking it away, as the Mothman is, or Thunderbird is described as doing. When we go to the Mothman Festival, we discuss a strange visitation or telepathy event that I had involving these three beings. It's interesting because just a couple of days ago, after we got back, I hear from Harriet, and in addition to this UFO sighting in her neighborhood, there's also she had three beings come to visit her while she was awake. Another thing that we talk about with Keel is that his most recent research is in Bigfoot sightings in near Bear Mountain in New York, where in segment 1, Neil Minderman and I talked about a Bigfoot sighting we had in that same park. Well, it turns out Keel is now investigating recent sightings in that same area. Here we are, 2 days away from the Mothman Festival, September 11th, 2003. I flew on a plane today, 2-year anniversary of the great tragedy precogged by many Mothman experiencers. There's lots of talk on the radio about the meaning of the event, how we need to, what are they saying that we need to do with this event? Stay patriotic, support the boys. Harriet?
It should become a national day of mourning, and they're debating whether or not it should become a national holiday. And the big fight is, no, it should not be a holiday. It should always just be considered a national day of mourning, like December 7th. So that's what they're debating on WLW Cincinnati.
Won't this lead to more terrorist events? If terrorist events can be turned into national holidays, won't the people that support national holidays then try to engineer tragedies to create more of these holidays?
Why, yes, Andy, 1 + 1 = 2. I believe that's exactly what would happen.
If these companies that are pumping prune juice out of Iraq, won't they just want to have another terrorist event? if President Plum doesn't get voted into office, won't Vice President Grape decide that they need to go pump more prune juice out of the desert?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's all connected anyway. It's all just a big setup anyway. So I think they've already got it lined up. Probably got the next terrorist event ready to roll. I wonder which bridge they're going to blow up and where it's going to be.
That's what you're feeling?
Yeah.
Bridge?
I felt that all along, that it was a bridge. And that's why I was really stunned when the FBI came out with the information about 6 or 8 months after the initial terrorist attacks about possibly blowing up the Bay Bridge in San Francisco, or the Oakland Bay Bridge, or the Golden Gate Bridge, because that's exactly what I think they're going to do. But I don't feel it's going to be on the West Coast.
Well, wouldn't they want to blow up a bridge that would cost a whole lot to rebuild?
Yeah, and you know what I keep seeing, and I don't know why I keep seeing this, but I'm envisioning something that spends a lot of time high and then low, high and then low. So what I'm thinking is someplace like one of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, like the Bay Bridge and Tunnel that goes from the tip of Virginia, the peninsula part of Virginia, back to the mainland of Virginia near Norfolk. And think about that, that's a big Navy installation.
Something that could be turned into a jobs program to keep the economy going?
Oh, definitely. Makes sense to me.
Create lots of dollars for big contractors?
Yeah, and I definitely have an inclination that it's on the East Coast.
In Whitley Strieber's Secret School, he has a vision of Washington, D.C. in 2036. And it's like it's been bombed out, like nuclear bombed out.
Yeah.
He thinks that they've moved they already admit that they've moved the government out of D.C. and into the suburbs, the shadow government they call it. Maybe they're doing that because they know that something like that's, the powers that be may let that happen in order to get us away from a democratic government, more toward a non-democratic government.
Well, I mean, there are quite a few numbers of people, including Bamford, that believes that we already have a shadow government, have for many, many years had a shadow government that has its own budget, apart from what we know to be the budget. And it's been operating at least since the 1930s, 1940s, and really came into prominence in the time of FDR, according to, if you believe what some people say about that.
Well, I was referring to newspaper articles in the New York Times. They were admitting that they had a whole staff in various facilities around the suburbs of D.C. in case there's a sniper got loose. I guess we probably won't see another sniper until re-election time, right?
Well, probably, because we'll need something. We'll need something.
What about the West Virginia sniper? Have you gotten any precogs or clairvoyant images of why this person is doing it?
Well, at first they were saying that they felt that was drug-related, and now that the police are saying that there's nothing to substantiate that, they don't know whoever leaked that, it's not true, whatever. And actually, honestly, I think it's just a copycat thing. Somebody's trying to get through 15 minutes of fame. Because how is she going to get it in West Virginia? Come on.
Well, you could get rescued over in Iraq or something.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true.
Or you could get a hit TV show where you play a good spy.
Ooh, true. Wow. Honestly, I think that is nothing more than a copycat thing with this guy going on in West Virginia, and he's looking, and I say that he'll go a while and then he'll start attacking again because he's looking to get caught because he wants the fame. So.
Well, if he's looking to get caught, why wouldn't he just keep on doing it?
He's going to. I'm just thinking he's taking a break for now.
Oh, okay.
Because maybe they're getting a little close. Maybe it's a little cat and mouse game. So we'll see where it turns out.
You duck and noose game?
Yeah.
As the first one was?
Yeah.
They do the code word, the duck is in the noose, and then suddenly the snipers are caught sleeping in a rest area on the interstate.
Yeah, how about that?
I know that's the first place I'd want to sleep if I was a sniper.
Yeah, a criminal on the run where they basically run everybody's plates every day. If they check anybody's sleeping. Yeah, I'd sleep there too. Makes perfect sense to me.
On the personal side, we have family feuding in the Colvin family. As I asked my sister for a little help at the booth there at the Mothman Festival, and she accuses me of using her. Here I am flying in from Seattle, asking her for a couple of hours of time. Probably, I'd say, the only 2 hours of time I've asked of her, and last 30 years, suddenly I become a user, and the Mothman phenomenon brings out strange things in the people that have experienced its glow. Sometimes emotions can flare up a little more intensely than usual. Especially, well, what I think is part of what it is there's a fear there. I think everyone who's experienced this phenomenon, and my sister, is one of these folks, and I think Harriet can attest to just the fact that when you decide that you're going to go public with this information, it's a little scary, and sometimes that comes up, and people have to work their way through it. Speaking of going public, the first time I decided to go public with this theme of abductions and paranormal was the CD that we did in 1998, the Power Dump CD. Since we're doing things backwards in the Hoyoka style, this CD has led to this film, which is leading to a book. And but I think when we first did that CD, that there was some trepidation, about coming out and saying, yeah, we saw this or we saw that, and bracing yourself for the ridicule and might come along with it. And there's been some, but I think ultimately in the long run, it's been very beneficial. I've been talking to a lady named Barbara who lives up in Youngstown. She's been experiencing this glowing Mary statue and the bleeding statue at the Catholic Church there. And shadow beings have been traipsing through the neighborhood. She's seen them several times. The animals go crazy. The shadow beings appear to deflect light. They sort of leave their own shadows. They're material, but they're sort of see-through at the same time. Not unlike some of the Sasquatch sightings people have seen, where the Sasquatch appear to be sort of walking above the snow, sort of with a gauzy look to them. You can sort of see through them. But she was afraid to go on record here, so we've canceled our trip to Youngstown, and we're heading instead to the Serpent Mound here in southern Ohio, and also Rocky Lake, the site of the early 1980s Mothman sightings, and my own personal missing time incident. On the radio, we have the discussion of a case in England of a woman who got an x-ray, baby was in the x-ray, she had high blood pressure coming, toxemia coming, so they went in for the cesarean. The baby was gone. Harriet, what do you think?
Alien abduction. No question. Alien abduction.
Have you run into this sort of thing in your research?
Oh yeah, I've seen it. In fact, I may even have personal experience with it.
Well, I had personal experience with that once. Way back in my wild youth. Was a situation similar to that, where the fetus disappeared. And I've spoken to one of the recipients there on Woodward Drive, and I believe I heard a similar story from her past as well. On our way here to the Serpent Mound, and also the nearby town of Harriet. Keel calls it the Mothman name game. Serpent Mound is located in Adams County, Ohio, which has the highest rate of unemployment in the state. Adams County is also the site of many Bigfoot encounters. In a moment we will be there, and I will be unveiling my new theory about the Serpent Mound, never before postulated by any other researchers. Serpent Mound is located at the confluence of the Ohio Brush River and the Baker Fork River. Okay, here we are at the Serpent Mound. Let's get a quick look. can see it there, a little bump. That's the end of it. So it's a long squiggle. If you look at it from the air, it's just it's an amazing sight. This is considered to be the best preserved earthwork in the United States. Harriet's picking up lots of vibes. Before we talk to her, I wanted to mention though that my theory is that the Serpent Mound is here because of the Mothman, the Thunderbird. In Native American lore, the Thunderbird is always shown to be coming down and grabbing the snake, the serpent, with its talons, carrying it off. So, if you were a Native American and you wanted to build a burial mound that was emblematic of the Mothman, you would build a serpent mound. And you're feeling some vibes?
Oh yeah, especially from the burial mound. There's like lots of hostility because they tell you that you should never walk on a burial mound, but still people do. And so there's lots of anger associated with that. You can feel the hostility around it.
Is the Serpent Mound itself a burial mound, or just the one mound there?
As far as I know, just the one mound, but they don't really know what the significance of that is. And like you said, you had your theory about it, and you know, a lot of people have definitely think that it was something that was to be viewed from the air. It just depends on who you ask.
So it could go back as far as the times of Quetzalcoatl. In fact, the tribes, it's mentioned in the literature that this could be, it could have a Mexican origin.
Yeah, I did
some of
see
those
that
tribes,
in
the Mayan
literature.
tribes.
Right, right.
Quetzalcoatl being the great white god that came down from the sky in a spaceship, and you know, all of these lines in Peru were also built to guide Quetzalcoatl in as he landed in a spaceship. That's the lore, the story.
I could buy that. Isn't this pretty good stuff?
Picking up anything. How far would you say we are from Point Pleasant as the crow flies?
About 50, 65 miles.
I'll bet it's not even that far.
It may not be.
This is certainly a nicely constructed mound. You have to wonder how they even discovered this thing if it had weeds growing on it. I mean, with the grass, of course, it just looks immaculate. But you know, then you think about, well, where were the Indians thinking when they built this? I think they were thinking about a flying being that would come down and symbolically sink its talons into the beautiful lines of the serpent.
I have to agree with it. I think they're paying homage to something. I see incense as an offering.
An offering?
An offering, yeah, absolutely an offering.
A lot of work,
Yeah,
toil,
yeah.
to honor that spirit that glides in the air above these hills.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful spot where it's at the meeting of this river. So this is sort of like the point on a cliff above the rivers, and there's really quite a nice view if you look to the west there, off in the distance. You can see the faraway hills.
As they said that most of the tribes steered clear of, just like West Virginia was an area. There were some tribes and everything, but for the most part, American Indian, Native American tribes steered from, and they really do believe that this is of some type of Mexican, Central American, or South American origin. They don't really know, but they do know that there was some type of superstition or a fear and that the Native Americans stay away from these areas of southeastern Ohio and in fact, the entire state of West Virginia.
Although I had some correspondence with Lauren Coleman a few years ago where we sort of looked at various pieces of information and came to realize that they did come up into West Virginia, but usually for burial ground things.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't really,
it's not where they lived. They may have lived here. They may have migrated to these areas shortly, but they always moved on because from everything that historians have been able to gather, they didn't like the way the spirits felt here. You see that repeatedly when you read about these areas, that there were migratory, I guess, tribes that moved from place to place, and they wouldn't stay in these areas very long at all before they ever got here.
Oh, so you're saying that this mound was built before the Indians got here?
Oh, absolutely. They do believe that. They absolutely believe that.
Harriet's spirit guide just told her to sample the water here. It's being pumped up from the confluence of the rivers here. Should I have some?
Oh, most definitely. You should have some.
Okay. By the way, both of these rivers that we find at the Serpent Mound, the Ohio Brush and the Baker, both are tributaries that run into the Ohio. So we are again back onto the tributary trail. The Mothman that was seen up here at Rocky Fork was seen near these tributaries. Looks like the Rocky Fork Lake flows into the Paint River, which flows into the Scioto River, which flows into the Ohio. So Rocky Fork itself is a tributary as well. Here we are. We are in Harriet, officially.
Yeah, I've got my own town. I feel really good. And you know, I felt your energy shift when you were back there at the Serpent Mound. It's when you turned the different directions, the north, south, east, and west, and you were doing some type of ritual there, your energy shifted. And I'd be anxious to see, because anytime I see someone's energy shift, it shows me there's been a subconscious change. Or I can feel their energy shift. It means there's been a subconscious change. So I'll be anxious to see what you dream about in the next couple days, or if you have any of those aha moments or deja vu experiences or whatever.
Here we are at Rocky Lake State Park. Just found the reference to the Coleman book. It says that around August of '82, a woman saw a Mothman and saw him again a year later fishing in Rocky Fork Lake. Drifted into a pristine cove on the southwest side, and we are on the south central part right now. Southwest would be over there. She saw an old, tall, topless tree, approximately 9 to 10 feet high, move about 4 feet to the side. Again it moved, only this time there was a partial twisting or rotation of the top 2 feet. It slowly maneuvered backward, keeping erect like a tree, into the woods, with no noises from it or underbrush, and it was as graceful as a bird. It stopped in the middle of a sunlit clearing. The wings unfolded with a span greater than most small airplanes. After a while, she reports it returned to its tree appearance, and she saw the semblance of 2 eyes and thought it was watching her. She saw it a year later, and it looked thinner. Perhaps it hadn't eaten in a while. 3 long, slender toes with a hooked toe or nail on lower leg. So here's a person who's actually seen the feet of the Mothman. We've been hearing for years that no one's seen the feet. It's right here. Look at this. Right there. Black and white. Believe it. So it was back in one of these coves where the unnamed witness saw the Mothman. Do you get any feelings as you face this direction, Harriet?
Yeah. About the third one back. Count 3 lumps of...
Here we are in the nearby town of Hillsboro, where the Masonic Lodge has a strong influence. We mustn't forget, it is September 11th. September 11th. Should it be a national holiday? What's your name?
Matthew.
Matthew. He's here at Wanda's Grill, and he has a tribal necklace that looks to me like, looks very similar to the Tibetan thog jags of the Mothman. What do you think, Harriet?
I don't know, because what caught me was the centerpiece of it, and it looks just like it. That's what caught my eye. And I actually have seen it before, that's why I wondered.
All right. We actually... Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Take this out of your way? Yeah. You better see he's taking a picture of his pie.
This happened near Dayton, Ohio.
Between Brant and Tip City on Wildcat Road. Years ago, my grandparents owned a farm, and my parents owned 2 acres, and my father had built a fishing lake, and it was a pay lake. They had a cabin, which they sold worms, minnows and candy bars and such, and it sat on top of this waterfall. And let's see. Oh, my older brothers and sisters used to party there. My parents would let them go back there to keep them out of trouble. And one night they saw a little hairy man with a really bad stench. And a few weeks later, some friends of theirs saw the same thing run across the street. But the house my grandparents lived in was haunted. It used to sit on this waterfall. And when they first moved there, back in the early 1900s, they moved the house up to where it sits to this day. And that house was haunted.
Wow.
Yeah. My sister and brother were playing on the front porch when my grandparents weren't home one day. And they saw in the front window, which it was called the sitting room, had the velvet furniture, the piano, and everything. And in the front window, they were like 5 and 6 years old. They saw a sheep man at this place.
Wow. A sheep?
With a goat's head, wool, and hooked hands just standing there, staring at him.
Wow.
Now, little kids, for years, they ran home, and for years, they were kind of like in between each other. Did we really see that? And yeah, they did. I mean,
yeah.
My brother's dead now, but my sister...
Well, my niece saw something very similar to that in her bedroom.
We were kids, and we would stay down there with my grandmother, and the upstairs was terrifying. I don't know if we scared each other or what, but even the adults were scared in my grandmother's house. It was a very old house.
I think when you're seeing sheep's head, satyrs, as they're called, satyrs, or I don't know how you exactly.
Satyrs.
He was smiling at him.
Yeah.
He was standing in our house, and all the adults and everybody was scared of that house. It was a feeling you go.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well,
You saw a mini Bigfoot.
Cool.
Mini Sasquatch. I think it's interesting that we find 2 Mothman related experiencers working in a grill that's in the Masonic building in Hillsboro. And Matthew, the guy with the Mothman jewelry, said he grew up in Over the Rhine of Cincinnati, part of Cincinnati where I used to live. He said his mother was a Wiccan. And I happened to live with a bunch of Wiccans in Over the Rhine in my college days. And had some strange experiences when I was living in that house with these. They were more dark witches, I would say, the people I was living with. I had a dream the other night that I was I bought the property next to Eddie Ray up on Woodward Drive, and it turned out to have special plants growing on it, special teas growing on it. And sure enough, who shows up to check out the tea but Bernardo Bertolucci, whose wife, who had green lipstick and looked like a Celtic maiden, said to me, well, Bernardo needs to drink the teas from Woodward Drive because his health depends on it. And the funny, this probably comes from the fact that I once met him in Seattle when he was filming The Little Buddha, and they were looking to do the making of documentary, and they were looking for a Buddhist group, a local Buddhist group to film, and they picked our men's group, and they came and they filmed our men's group, and Bertolucci and a couple of his guys, assistants or whatever, got involved in this discussion, and we had this animated discussion about reality, and I'm gonna have to think more about what we were talking about exactly. It's been many years, but for some reason it just popped into my mind while we were here in Hillsboro, and I thought I better just put it on the tape now for whatever subconscious linkage it may provide, and also to grease up my film with a little name dropping. Speaking of name dropping, I need to start talking about Dennis Hopper a little bit, because I had the opportunity to work alongside him while making the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. I have to think. Oh, one of his quotes was, "The world is made up of two kinds of people: weasels and weasel slappers." So it's 2003. The choice is yours. Decide: are you a weasel or are you a weasel slapper? Harriet?
I'm a weasel slapper, definitely.
Here we are in world famous Nelsonville, Ohio, has the highest unemployment in the country, in the state, but it also has something else.
Oh yeah, it certainly does. Back in, I believe, November of 1967, there was a Mothman sighting here. Two elderly women on their way back from church on a Sunday night saw it. Well, actually, it wasn't nighttime yet. It was still somewhat twilight, so it was one of those daylight sightings. Saw something huge in the sky, and it swooped down on their car and followed them for several miles, and they finally stopped at a sheriff's office, and the sheriff also sighted it, and that was 1967, November.
Perhaps we should speculate on a moment as to why Mothman seems to appear in towns that have high unemployment. Perhaps it's that if it's true that the Mothman comes as a protector or a guide to help people enter the world of atemporality, it's sort of like the meek shall inherit the earth kind of thing. It's like Mothman reveals himself to the poor and humble because that is their role. Their role is to bring spirit back, to keep the spirit alive, to keep the old traditions alive when the capitalist society has abandoned them. We also just passed by the diamond plant here in Nelsonville. Harriet tells me that was a clay pipe manufacturing place, but it reminded me of the diamond industry and how I was just reading that the Bush family owns, or actually George Sr. is on the board of the world's largest diamond mine, who recently, in the Congo, in order to get around the laws that say that small miners may not be kicked off of their claims, this company went in and bulldozed 30,000 to 50,000 miners in their holes alive, buried them alive, in order to say that they had not kicked them off of their land. Instead, they just buried them alive on their land. And since the Bush family is from Ohio originally, and their son is worshiping the Mothman sculpture stone owl in Bohemian Grove, it could be that this connection has come full circle from the roots of the Mothman here in Ohio to the Mothman in Bohemian Grove and worldwide escapades and brazen capitalism. As we make our way to the Mothman Festival, passing by Athens, Ohio. Athens was the site of a strange, another missing time incident. I keep remembering them. That's the funny thing. I thought I only had one, but I just remembered another one. When I was here in Athens visiting in the college, I hung out with a guy, a friend of a friend, and he was some kind of a warlock, and he took me to a part of Athens that he said was haunted. And I think Harriet's verified this, that there is indeed a part of Athens there that has a lot of strange sightings and things. It's near a park, sort of a wooded area. And he and I went to this wooded area, and I had just this bizarre experience where it felt like I could hear the wind blowing from another dimension or something. And the whole, I don't remember anything else that happened that evening. We went to this hillside. He said, yeah, a lot of people go into this strange state over here, a state of mind, and it's like an alternate reality. And sure enough, I don't remember a thing, and it was terrifying. I was really afraid. And also, there seems to be this same idea seems to come up in the recent David Lynch movie Mulholland Drive, where this creepy transient who lives behind the fast food joint, and this transient, it's like this fast food joint is a window area to another dimension, and this transient sort of knows what all is going on there. Yeah, talk about it for a minute.
Well, my only take on that is I recently saw Sylvia Brown. She was with Larry King, and they were talking to a child that was dying of some particular kind of cancer, but he was so evolved as a human being that it was unbelievable. And he had such insight on what the world was, what reality was, what it wasn't, the whole 9 yards. And Sylvia Brown started talking about traveling mystics, what some people call angels. And she calls them traveling mystics. And she says anybody can be one, but you're most likely to find a traveling mystic in the form of a street person, someone who's poor, a child, someone that you would not think would have access to great wisdom.
Harriet just mentioned the fact that her guide yesterday told her while we were at the Mound to drink some of the water there. And it's funny because I've had the same sort of things happen to me where I've been places and felt like it was important to taste the water. And my explanation of this, to be a little pseudo-scientific with it, is that a lot of information is stored in water, molecular information. And there are even things in Europe called living water, which are waters that are taken from pristine underground areas where the waters there have not been exposed to any industrial processes, and these waters are supposed to contain a lot more live information than normal water. The waters that we use that get pumped through the various pipes and filtering mechanisms, this is considered to be dead water by the natives. So these devices have been made where they simply put a sample of this live water into a little capsule, and then you somehow plug this into your water line, and as you run your dead water past the live water, this molecular information supposedly gets transferred into the dead water and transforms it, so that you can literally turn large amounts of dead water into live water simply by allowing it to pass close by the live water. And supposedly in Europe they've taken lakes that were dead, that were acidic enough that there was no living fish in the lakes anymore, and they've used this process to bring back the entire ecosystem there.
I don't have any trouble believing that at all, because why wouldn't water hold energies? Why wouldn't water hold tremendous information of the ages? Perhaps he was asking for, because he asked both of us to drink the water, perhaps it had something to offer us, and we're just not consciously aware of what that is yet, because anybody knows that has a guide, they don't tell you a lot of things all the time. They're wanting for you to figure it out for yourself, and that's how you'll know if you you're not quite sure whether a person's your true guide or not, they always do everything for your highest benefit. And one of the ways they can do that is a lot of times to let you figure it out for yourself. They'll direct you, but they don't always give you the immediate message of why they're doing what they're doing. They might tell you later, but a lot of times they want you to figure it out for yourself.
In essence, they're teaching you that the process is important.
Yes. In fact, that the process is of probably more importance, than what we would term the answer a lot of times, because that's where most of your growth takes place, is in the process of things.
It could be that water's capacity to hold this information is the reason why the Mothman seems to travel these waterways. That would be the easiest way for other dimensional information to make itself apparent to the human mind, being that water is the primary component in the human mind. The other thing about water is that it is the most compressed element. People will dispute this, but it actually is true that water cannot be compressed any more than it already is. If you put it into a vice, seal it all off, there's literally no way to smash it down. And it's ironic that even though it's the most compressed material, it actually flows. The fact that it has been proven to be the most compressed material also, I think, adds more credence to this idea that water is the ultimate elemental information conduit. To get a sense of all the information that is stored in water, all you have to do is think about that new invention that they're talking about, the hydrogen car, powered simply by atoms of hydrogen, one of the elements of water. Think of the hydrogen bomb, one atom of hydrogen unleashing that much energy. Why couldn't it be that memories from the past and events from the past, creatures from the past, why couldn't those images of those creatures be stored in the atoms of molecules and manifest near large conglomerations of said molecules? Maybe the Mothman is an ancient creature that's been around forever, and we are seeing energetic reformations of that being. Okay. So, back on the Ohio.
Okay, I just want to know what's up with this. This is a campground. Campgrounds are supposed to be out in nature. Well, what natural beauty? A campground right across from a frickin' nuclear power plant.
You gotta love it. This is what it makes America great. So for just a few dollars a night, you can stay in one of these trailers, pull up your RV right across from the nuke plant.
Yeah, I think
Pretty
I'm
cool.
going to buy an RV just for that purpose.
I bet the corn that's grown here is really good for you too. Plus the ears of corn that are grown across from the plant here are very large, so you get a good healthy portion. We're coming up here on Ravenswood, West Virginia, getting ready to cross over the Ohio into West Virginia, and the Ravenswood Bridge is of the same style as the Silver Bridge that collapsed in Point Pleasant, and we think it's the bridge that people had to drive to once the Silver Bridge had collapsed in order to get back and forth across the river. Here we are in Ravenswood, West Virginia. The raven is the most common animal that takes on the form of the Mothman or a thunderbird in Native American mythology. The eagle is the other. And usually places with the name Raven in them are places that have experienced Mothman or thunderbird sightings in the past, and the Indians, named it after that, and that name is carried on over into the English.
We know that Ravenswood has a haunted movie theater, but we also know that Ravenswood was host to several Mothman sightings between November 1966 and December 1967. In fact, so many of them that they're too numerous to even tell you about. but he was seen many, many times around here.
We have left Ravenswood, and now we're going to do a short trip here to Ripley, West Virginia. Bob Tietz has written a book about West Virginia UFOs, and in his book he mentions that Ripley is the UFO central of West Virginia. Both of our mothers grew up near here. Jessica Lynch from Palestine is pretty close to here. We're going to be, Harriet has lots of cousins and uncles living in Ripley, and we are going to go to Ghost Ridge, which is the nexus of UFO Central. Here we are on Ghost Ridge, Ripley, West Virginia, the most haunted area in West Virginia. Harriet?
And tons of sightings were supposedly seen here. Lots of strange lights, lots of glowing balls, all that kind of things. And who knows?
Shit. Change the battery pack. Go ahead.
Who knows? Maybe tons of Mothman stuff too, but throughout the ages, this is the scene of lots of glowing balls, lots of things landing here. And I've heard about this since early 60s that I remember, so a lot of that happened long before I was ever born.
Didn't you say you're having some funny feelings back there?
Yeah,
Ghost Ridge?
I kind of got the heebie-jeebies standing there on the ridge. It was kind of that feeling that I get right there in the solar plexus that tells me that that's like a window area.
It's mentioned in the Mothman prophecies as well.
Oh, I guess I must have missed that.
There was a sighting, a Ripley sighting in there.
I can believe it.
When I was a boy, I worked for a surveyor, and one of the few times I ever came to Ripley proper was to do some surveying here, and it was on Ghost Ridge. The jeweler here in Ripley is only giving 0% interest because of God. Freedom is not just a word, it's fighting and getting oil fields. That looks like an eerie face. They still have Dollar General stores here in West Virginia. Here you've got your Mothman possum stew. Here we are, Palestine, West Virginia. We have found the Tony Orlando oak tree, which he bought from Harriet's relatives who run the nursery around here. And he asked that it be planted here for Jessica. Harriet is now going to give us a brief rundown of what it was like for her relatives to work with Tony Orlando in ordering this tree for Jessica.
Well, for the longest time, they got this whole thing set up, and you know, it was just a man, as far as they knew, that wanted a tree planted with a yellow ribbon in the yard, and it was just kind of funny because they didn't know it was him until he used his credit card, and he said he wanted it kept quiet that it was him that was doing it.
Wow, really?
So I don't know if that was ever revealed in the end or what, but.
We'll tie a yellow ribbon round the old oak tree.
A local merchant had them made.
Nice.
So what's over here?
Come here, there's Mothman droppings there.
Chocolate covered malt balls. Very nice.
Here we have your Mothman license plates. We also have the license plate holders for the Mothman license plate. Here is the moth girl. We were just talking earlier on this trip that why not have a moth girl?
I agree, most definitely.
Here we go. So here we have a Mothman toy with a dead dog that goes along with it, an accessory. Good shot of that accessory. Here we are in Point Pleasant. We've just set up the booth for tomorrow's festival, and as we were walking down here to the Sahara Steakhouse, what do we see but the future Mothman statue? The Mothman faces the Ohio River, where he has wreaked so much havoc. We met a guy earlier, Mike Frost, we'll call him, who lives in the area, and he told us about a sighting he had of Mothman. And I was hoping that we could get you to describe it to us, since it, while it's fresh in your mind.
Said about 5 years ago, he was visiting some property that he had, would have been southeast of here along 35, and he said it is in Mason County, about the highest point in West Virginia, or in Mason County. And he'd gone up there, was kind of pitzing around, and it was about dusk. It wasn't really full broad daylight, but it wasn't dark either. And this man is an experienced hunter, hunts everything, big game, everything. And he thought that he had seen a deer. He saw these eyes. It was about 100 yards away from him, and right beside a tree. And he'd seen these eyes, and he thought it was a deer that had fallen, broken its nose or something, is what he said. And as he approached it and got closer, it turned its neck around, and he realized it was 7 or 8 feet tall. It was a grayish white color, big, dark, inky eyes. And then he noticed it floating, just gliding along the ground. No noticeable feet, hands, or wings. It was just floating. It was like an entity of some kind. And he tried to move toward it, because he figured if he moved toward it, as most wild animals will take off in the other direction, but it didn't. It started to come at him. So he was in a truck. He took off in the truck, and
He took off toward it in the truck.
yeah, took off toward it at first, and he said that it let out a screech that was deafening, just deafening, and it was like 100 yards away. And he said it was like an M80, I think is what he said, exploding. Right, his face actually shook. He actually felt the vibration of the screech in his face.
That could be why they call it the Thunderbird.
Could be. And he took off in the other direction. He said he knew, he never turned around to look, but he knew that it was following him. And it took him 6 months to go back there for even a small business. But he does go back today, but he doesn't go at night.
He also said that a lot of his friends had seen it in the same area.
Yeah, he did say that.
And he also, and it appears from what you were saying earlier that that's the area that Keel used to go to a lot to watch the lights go down.
Right, by the Chief Cornstalk hunting grounds is what they called it. And Keel used to go there in the 60s to watch the lights every night. They would come down on that hillside. And at the time, I believe it is actually mentioned in the Keel book that is the tallest point in the county.
This is Main Street photography, Point Pleasant.
Main Street,
The higher the hair.
closer to God.
say much. To me, it's a masterpiece.
Carl.
But I'm saying that I was so frightened. Like I said, I started at the feet and came up, and I probably recognized it. But I was so terrified that, you know, a red eye wouldn't have scared me any more than when I'd already been frightened. It was terrifying. Never want to see the creature again. Never have no desire. I never, you know, it'd be on your wildest imaginations of walking out and running onto something. And it was like he was waiting. Remember, it was kind of resting up against the car, but, you know, just relax.
Is that right here in Point Pleasant?
It's in here, eh?
Which is real close by.
My sister had lived there for 20-some years, and I had lived in the same spot with her, went to high school. And I never had no fear of anything up there. Never dreamed of it.
So what was life like after that, knowing this thing was
Very
around?
terrified. I'd get in a car of the night, and I could imagine the thing was in the back seat. And then I'd hit my brake and bump my head on the windshield, and it was just every time I go out after dark after that, it was like, he's here, he's around, you know.
How do you feel about it today?
I'm not as petrified. I don't still drive after night by myself after 30-some years.
Because of that?
Well, yes. I don't ever want to see the thing again. I don't know what its purpose was. And even though it didn't harm me, and it could have, when I fell on top of my daughter, and I heard the flopping of these wings, and I knew I saw feathers and the size of this creature, I thought, well, it's going to reach down and pick me up, and this is it. I don't know where I'm going or whether this is the end.
Plus you had your daughter with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
little 4-year-old girl.
Does she remember anything about
Yeah.
it? She does?
She remembers parts of us running and screaming. Oh, yeah.
Well, what was it like now? Then you told your story to a few people, and what did they think, you were crazy? Or?
I've never had anybody. Most people that know me, they know that I would not make up
Oh,
something.
no, I'm not
I know
saying
there's
that.
people that doesn't know.
No, I'm not saying that, but I mean, I just wondered when you tell a fantastic story like that, I mean, is that difficult to do? I mean,
No, it's not, because it's the truth. And, you know, it's not hard to tell the truth.
so you've never been hesitant about telling people?
No.
Didn't your friends or family
No.
members or anything? No.
No.
They didn't say, wow.
No, they would say, if you saw my soul, you say you saw it, you saw it.
Did you feel better when you heard other people had seen
Yeah, I
it as
did.
well?
I felt like, well, you know, it wasn't just me. It was,
What about the flying saucers and all that stuff?
I saw things that I couldn't describe. I wasn't what they were. I saw the light that night in the sky coming towards us as we were walking in the car. But I didn't stop. I did see all the lights, but my brother kept saying, stop, it's not a plane. You know, and I said, I don't want to see it. He said, it's not a plane, stop, look at this. I said, I don't want to see it.
That's before you saw the creature.
Yeah, it was like I was being drawn. Because I was a driver that night, and I went to the passenger side of the car, and it was just like I was being drawn to go where I was supposed to go, you know, push in. I wasn't in control of my
Do you
life.
think there's a connection between the flying saucers and Mothman?
Yeah,
How about the bridge incident?
I want to know.
Hard to say.
I've tried to, I really tried to. I've been told stories, and, you know, by my uncle, who's passed away now. He lived in one of these apartments right near the park.
What did he say?
He said he saw a thing that looked like a bird with a man on the bridge 2 days ago. He said he saw it fly.
So you believe there's some connection between Mothman, the flying saucers, and the bridge
Oh,
incident?
I think maybe it was.
Or was that a curse having that happen to you? I mean, did it change your life?
Well, it changed my life for a while. You know, I mean, if there's something out there that's not, I've never seen on this earth,
I can't imagine.
you know, it makes you stop and wonder what really is out there.
Do you think you were going crazy or something?
No, I knew what I saw.
And your brother saw it too,
I
right?
did seek medical attention. I went to the doctor, my nurse, because I couldn't sleep for the night. And and I kept thinking I could hear this flopping of the wings on top of the roof. And my husband would confirm, no, there's nothing up there. But the last thing I heard was the flopping of the wings. And I just kept hearing the flopping of the wings like he's coming back.
Would you still dream about that today?
Sometimes.
Really? 35 years later? Wow. And then it all stopped, right? Nobody else had any
I
sight?
sleep upstairs, but I always pull my blinds so I can see the sky and the stars. But I never look.
Like you're afraid he might be up there?
I don't want to see anything out there.
Marcella, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stay right where you are for a second.
Here we have the Mothman's photographer festival booth here at Point Pleasant. Harriet's manning the booth. Got your Mothman t-shirts. Yeah. Got your Mothman product. How's it going today, Harriet?
Sales have been brisk, Andy.
Really?
Sales have been brisk, yeah. We had a little clearance sale here at the end, and this is all we've got left. We've done well.
So what are the highlights so far today?
Basically, just the intelligent stories that we've heard. The fact that it doesn't really seem that anybody's come here to make up a story. People are very genuine, and a lot of people, they've never told their stories before, so it's been a very interesting day.
Here's the Mothman interview room. I was just interviewed in there by WSAZ Huntington. I'm hoping I'm going to be on the news tonight.
Today, the town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, celebrated their local legend. News Channel 3's Brooke Thacker has the story.
No, it's not the Mothman, but it is a fashion statement. From shirts to DVDs, Mothman fans are in the right place. Take Deborah DeBow. She originally came to Point Pleasant just passing through, but she knew she had to come back.
Before I knew anyone else, I came for the Mothman, and I intend to stay here for him too.
Mothman is really unique for Point Pleasant because a lot of people come for Mothman, but at the same time they'll go to the Farm Museum or the River Museum, the Twin Dewey Park, Silver Bridge Memorial, and that's what we want to do.
At the Mothman Festival, you can buy Mothman souvenirs. Meet John Keel, the author of the Mothman Prophecies. That's the book that spun off to the recent movie starring Richard Gere and News Channel 3's own Susan Nicholas and Doug Corsangi. You can even give your Mothman testimonial.
And I saw a shadowy form that looked like a Mothman.
Andy Colvin, originally of Charleston, is making a documentary recording eyewitnesses and the history of the Mothman.
Well, the thing that I've been focusing on is what has happened to them since they've seen the Mothman. And that's where you see the similarities.
And just today, the town of Point Pleasant erected this statue.
So after this year's festival, believers and skeptics alike will be able to catch Mothman for themselves in downtown. Brooke Thacker, WSAZ News Channel 3, Point Pleasant.
Wow, now if you blink, you miss Doug's and my cameos. Now this is the second year for the festival, and organizers say they hope to make the Mothman Festival an annual event. Another beautiful...
It's going to be huge. It's going to be as big as... what?
The Pumpkin Show in Circleville.
The wings are really good.
Want to buy it?
Those eyes are supposed to reflect, but they're not doing it.
Not a little light over here in the middle of the street.
Well, they got a searchlight up there. It's just lighting the figure.
Maybe it's just because it's not ready. Not ready for you.
It's pretty good. It's looking pretty scary. What do you think?
Wow, I'm impressed actually. The eyes are pretty creepy. They're supposed to reflect.
Yeah, I was looking at them close today. The eyes.
Here we are at the Iron Gates, and we're going to get we are getting the Mothman special. And, you know, there's all kinds of things. People are patenting the name Mothman this or Mothman that. Like we have Mothman wings at the pizza place, where they also have Mothman pizza. And what else was there?
That's all I remember, but it was all patent pending.
Patent pending.
And I wrote a book about my experiences, and the editors took it and cut it in half.
Mm-hmm.
They threw out half of it. And then the publisher, who was determined she was going to make me famous, she dropped dead on me, the famous publisher.
Yeah.
And so the book had very little circulation. And then in the 1980s, copies of it in mint condition started turning up all over the country. And we couldn't figure, the only thing I can figure is that one of these Taiwan, what do you call them?
Presses or...
Yeah, you know, they fake records and all. And somebody there did that with Jadoo, but why Jadoo? That was the name of the book. There are many other books they could have stolen from that would have been more profitable. But this book is suddenly turned up in mint condition over and over again. Somebody, it may be possible that somebody had several cartons of it hidden away, but they changed the publisher after the lady dropped dead. The book rights went to Simon & Schuster, and I don't think they had a warehouse full of them, and it's all very mysterious.
That book seemed to be like it was a spiritual quest of yours as a young man.
Well, that's what editors tried to make it.
Oh, okay.
They took a lot of stuff out. They especially took out my mind-bending, profound philosophy that was in there.
What was that?
I don't know. Just my usual mind-bending philosophy. When people try to get me involved in philosophical discussions, they end up nowhere.
Okay.
I really, I've gone through all that so many years ago that now I'm just concerned with keeping the planet Earth going. I don't think we have much of a future here. I think it's time for us to build a rocket and go to Mars or something.
Do you think that there's something to these stories about the end, the 2012 being the end of the Mayan calendar and the other calendars, and that we're at a turning point?
Well, they've predicted the end of the Earth every few years for all my life. And of course, a lot of religions are based on that, and Armageddon, and it always seems like we're right on the edge of extinction, and we keep going. Like all the things that are happening in the Middle East now are reasonably outlined in the Bible, and people who read the Bible carefully get scared to death that these things are coming to pass.
I have a little theory that this last blackout in New York may have been the one that was predicted in the Mothman prophecies. Do you think that's a crazy idea?
I don't know if I predicted one.
Well, I remember there being talk about others having a premonition that there would be a blackout in New York, and I think it was that one partial one did occur when President Ford or somebody flipped the switch.
President Johnson, yeah. He was having a high-level meeting with the Russians in Glassboro, New Jersey. And I remember that all the lights failed in Glassboro, and they had a lot of trouble with telephones and things. There were a lot of the predictions that are in that book that came to pass. Martin Luther King's assassination. There were a lot of predictions of the assassination of the Pope, and there were assassination attempts as you know, he got shot, which is not very healthy. And we also had a renegade priest tried to stab him. And it's tough being the Pope.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I don't know if you remember this, but I told you that in my past as a child we had built a shrine to the Mothman.
Yeah,
And
you just told me
the
that
Mothman had shown up, and that we had a premonition of this destruction in New York in 2001. So, having had that experience, it seems to me that some of these prophecies were way ahead of their time,
right.
maybe 35 years or whatever, which led me to think that maybe this prediction of this big blackout in New York was this most recent one, and it just took that long for it to occur.
Right. Well, the attack on the World Trade Center, none of our psychics saw that coming. If you keep up with the psychic literature, which is not easy, normally if we have a major event like the assassination of President Kennedy, it turned out that hundreds of people foresaw that. But with this thing at the World Trade Center, it took everybody by surprise, all the psychics and everybody. And,
well, the destruction that I saw was really much more than that. I saw a premonition of the destruction of more buildings. So I'm wondering if that prophecy was simply changed by awareness, or if maybe there's a further one down the road, a further major act.
Well, the pundits on television are telling us now that London is next, and there have been a lot of predictions about something happening in London. Of course, it's a major city full of people, and it's pretty hard to protect. But very often these predictions just lead us astray. While we're watching London, they're doing something to Cairo. The prediction business is very hazardous.
Well, Whitley Strieber talks about it in his Secret School book, and he says that he thinks that these premonitions are warning tools that sort of arise in humanity as we reach these cataclysmic times. That it allows for changing the future, to changing a bad outcome and making it, changing it before it gets here. Do you think there's anything to that?
I don't think you can change the future. I think if we knew exactly what's going to happen 6 months from now, we couldn't do anything about it, because we're not that well organized, that civilized. If we were, we could have a perfect world, and the world becomes more imperfect all the time. I've given a lot of thought to the future, and it seems to me that people who can see the future has to exist in some form, or they wouldn't be able to see it. And I have written about finding a way to tap into this, whatever it is, the universal mind, and then we can see the future. And once we can see the future, and once we know the future of the human race, then this is the childhood's end, and it's all over. We can let the dolphins and the Mothman have the planet, because we don't seem to be doing very much for this planet. We're systematically destroying it, and destroying everything on it, killing off all the life forms. And I'm not sure that's the real plan for this planet.
So earlier you said that you're in this sort of, the thing that you're doing now is trying to keep this going, or trying to find a way to, I guess, live more in harmony. Is that what keeps you coming back to Point Pleasant?
I don't know what keeps me coming back to Point Pleasant. It's pretty much the way they said it in the movies, where Dr. Leak warns, what's his name, Richard Gere, warns him not to go back to Point Pleasant. And I had a lot of warnings like that. And I can't see that Point Pleasant is the center of anything. Universal harmony or whatever. there are other places in the United States where people gather with that kind of thing in mind. They're more attuned to it. People in West Virginia are just people, and we've run into very few psychics.
In my case, I approached the Mothman from a desire to see him. It wasn't. Most people just stumble across him, and it frightens them. Do you think there's a difference if you're a person who wants to find the Mothman, like yourself or like me, that changes the way that encounter would play out?
Well, I know that this happens to many people, that they want to see a flying saucer. They want to see Mothman. They want to see something to confirm their beliefs, whatever their beliefs are. There are people who sit cross-legged in a cave for 30 years to attain Godhead and become part of God. And, we had this group a few years ago who committed suicide, thinking that's the way to join the flying saucers.
The Heaven's Gate cult?
Yeah, the Heaven's Gate cult.
Well, my theory on that was, and I don't know if you remember this, but that was the same day that the Martin Luther King family came out and said that they thought James Earl Ray was innocent and that it was the government that had done it. And I just saw it as a...
They went to court and won. It was too late for James Earl Ray, but they had a big court thing claiming that another man was the mastermind behind the whole thing.
Raoul.
Well, not Raoul, a guy who lived in the South, a businessman. They had the evidence on him, and the jury agreed with him, and they were awarded $1, I think.
Yeah.
And it didn't make the newspapers at all. Yeah. The only press it got in New York was in one of the Harlem newspapers, but the other papers just avoided the subject.
Yeah, that was Jowers, the owner of the bar. He had taken the gun or whatever and shuffled it out. Speaking of conspiracies like that, I was listening to a talk recently by Walter Bauert, and he wrote a great influential book in the 70s called Operation Mind Control. And he is now saying that he thinks that the cutting edge of mind control research has something to do with UFOs, but he didn't really go into the details of it. And I was wondering if that rings a bell with you at all. Do you think there's manipulation going on within this phenomenon? I think it's a natural phenomenon, but that there is also manipulation going on by agencies or people.
I had a friend named Ivan Sanderson, who was a real scientist, and he had looked into the UFO stuff and written a lot about it, and he kept referring to the mind patrol, that people's minds were being somehow tampered with in what he had discovered, and there was nothing we could do about it. And as you know, you've known a lot of people who are obsessed or who go way out on a limb on this stuff. Whitley Strieber is a good example. He started out as just wanting to be a writer, and he's ended up with like his mind is opened up to all kinds of things. He's now, I think, back in Texas with a radio program. But did you read his book about the storms, the coming storms, or he wrote a book about the strange changes in the weather, which
it's been a while since I read it.
It's like 2 or 3 years that it came out, and it did not become a big bestseller. I'm surprised. Well, of course, timing is very important in any book, and if you come out with the biggest, best written book of all time, and it comes out with at the same time that Hillary's book comes out, people are going to buy Hillary's book, not yours. And that happens over and over.
In terms of trying to maneuver through this minefield of paranormal phenomenon, I've speculated that it's important for people to try to look at their own experience and figure out if it was a natural, energetic phenomenon, or if it was some sort of, if there was some sort of a government or Masonic or whatever sort of influence on it. It seems to me it's important to try to look at your own situation and see and break the two, try to separate the two out. Do you think that's important?
Well, the thing that works against all these conspiracy theories is that the government is very stupid. It's not capable of conspiracy. They try conspiracies against each other, but they're very stupid all the time. Most governments consist either of madmen, like Adolf Hitler and company, or they consist of small-town lawyers who have suddenly talked their way into a big position and handling billions of dollars, and they can't even handle their own bank account. And there are other things at work here that we don't understand. That somebody runs everything, and we don't know who it is. That's what it amounts to. You look at the economic situation very closely, and the oil situation and all. There's somebody running this thing and had planned it for a long time, and we don't know who they are. They're sitting on a mountaintop somewhere or in a penthouse somewhere and keeping a very low profile. And when they die, they don't even get an obituary. And these are the people we really have to think about and go after. But George Bush spends a lot of his time on his ranch, and we have the Arabian countries run by very wealthy men who have no real interest in running countries. They just want to run themselves and run their business, the oil business or whatever they're running. There's got to be some guy out there like a Howard Hughes type who is really a visionary and has knowledge of what he's doing and how he's doing it. And we've never tried to interpret the actions of this man. And for a while I did think it was Howard Hughes, because he fitted into all of the patterns. He was a recluse, he was a nut, he was filthy rich, and he was capable of almost anything. And he got them, when he moved to Las Vegas, he got them to stop the atomic bombs in Nevada, the testing of atomic bombs. And not many men had the power to do that. And so he, nobody ever really found out where all of his money went. He did contribute heavily to the CIA, and there must be people in the CIA who are operating on their own.
Well, I heard this crazy theory that he was kidnapped by Onassis and held on an island for 20 years on heroin.
I never heard that one.
And that Onassis appropriated all of that money. It's called the Gemstone File.
Oh, well, yeah. That was pretty much fiction. That book.
Yeah. I wanted to focus a bit on, well, with my own situation, I feel as if it's a difficult, if you're a witness, if you start off meeting this phenomenon as a witness, you have an experience or two, and then you decide to become a researcher and start looking at other cases, trying to figure it out, that you run into problems with people like cryptozoologists who think that if you're a witness that somehow your credibility goes down. And I remember I was talking to you the other day, and you'd made a statement that you started off as a ridiculous, I think you used the word ridiculous, you'd started off as a ridiculous figure, so therefore there was no, that issue of trying to lower your credibility was sort of mute.
I spent years of my life writing jokes for television. I wrote Merv Griffin's ad-libs at one point.
I didn't know that.
There are a lot of people writing ad-libs. You see these comedians on television, you think they're very funny people. They aren't. They got 10 guys behind the scenes writing jokes for them. Regis Philbin, when he had his show You Want to Be a Millionaire, they had Regis was sitting in front of a television set, and they had 3 or 4 guys sitting backstage, and every situation that came up, these guys were crack humorists, and they would immediately type in a joke, and Regis would read it off the TV screen, and everybody would say, "Oh, that Regis is really fast-witted and funny." Well, the guys who were fast-witted and funny were sitting backstage earning $10,000 a minute, or whatever. And Jay Leno, if you watch on Fridays on Jay Leno's show, they run the crawl on Fridays, and he has like 20 writers writing all of his monologues and all of his jokes. And Johnny Carson used to have a script with him on stage, and you'd see him shuffling papers, and if you were an outsider, you said, "What the hell are those papers?" And what they were the scripts for he had jokes for all the visitors that came on. The writers had all prepared jokes ahead of time, and then there would be subjects that the people didn't want to discuss. That would be listed there. Don't ask about his former marriage, and so Carson would follow the instructions.
If people knew this, they'd have more appreciation for this kind of cinema, where you're having to answer questions. There's no cue cards. There's no nothing like that going on. But
well, I wrote cue cards too, and all the stuff that went in cue cards.
Have you talked much about your childhood? Because I remember reading that you had some kind of a paranormal experience as a child. I think some lights in your room.
Around the age of 12, I was living in an old farmhouse upstairs. Everybody else was sleeping downstairs, and there came a knocking on the wall. And at first I thought it was squirrels in the attic or something, and I did my scientific investigation of the whole house, couldn't find anything. This went on for several weeks. Couldn't find any explanation for these knockings. And then I learned that you could communicate with them, just like the Fox sisters learned. Knock 3 times for this and 2 times for that. And so as a 12-year-old, I didn't have many interesting questions to ask, but I was communicating with this thing that was knocking in the wall. And this drove me to the public library to find any books I could on psychic phenomena. They only had about 3. Up until the 60s, all of this stuff was really taboo. You don't realize it now how taboo it was. It was almost illegal. They'd almost put you in jail for getting into psychic phenomena, parapsychology. And it was only, there have been like 5 new ages, and each new age has brought us to another level. And then the people grow up and forget about it, and then a few years pass, 10 years pass, and somebody like Shirley MacLaine starts up again. And it's a phenomenon in itself. It's like there's a timetable, and every generation is elevated a little bit. And until, did you ever read Childhood's End? Because I'm always quoting that. It's a Arthur C. Clarke science fiction book, and that's basically his story, was that eventually we evolve into something else. We evolve into a spiritual thing. And then we don't need all of this other stuff, the trappings that go with being human beings. We abandon that and just become spiritual beings.
Speaking of spiritual beings, there are stories now that the Sasquatch are psychic. And I know when you were in Nepal, you said you had seen a couple.
What I saw animals in a distance.
Right.
And the natives told me it was the Yeti. And at that time, interest in the Yeti was very high. And the publisher told me, I told them it was probably a bear. And they said, well, we'll make it into a Yeti. Give them something to sell. And,
well, apparently there is an alternate form of bear that's up there that they've, I think Reinhold Messner, the great climber, has done.
I read his book.
Yeah. And it sounds like there is this secondary being, or a rare kind of a bear.
He believes in it enough so that he moved to Tibet and I think he's still chasing it. I don't think he's caught it, but the Chinese and the Russians are very big on this, and they have financed big expeditions to go to these areas where they were seeing them in Russia and China, and so far they've turned up very little. And meanwhile, in the United States, in the state of Washington, somebody gave $5 million to one of the Bigfoot chasers, and he got helicopters out and all kinds of equipment and expensive equipment, and every time the phone rang, they'd all jump into the helicopter and try to go to the scene. And they spent the $5 million. They lived very well while they were chasing Bigfoot, but they never caught Bigfoot.
Well, there's a fellow named Lapsaritis who's written a book called The Psychic Sasquatch, and he claims that that's the totally wrong approach, that if you go into the forest and you quietly meditate for several days and follow these native meditations, that the Sasquatch will psychically or telepathically contact you. Do you think there's anything to that?
No, but it just wouldn't apply just to the Sasquatch. It would apply to almost anything. If you wanted to see a big bird, God, I just saw a big bird. They're flying. I guess they're out there. They're feeding on. There are a lot of wrens and small birds out there, and these hawks and things are coming in for their dinner. A terrible thought, but that's what they do. There's so much energy has been spent on these subjects. They're writing about them and exploring them, and we've always ended up with nothing, and that's made me not sour on these subjects, but I know that we have to take another approach that's entirely different. We had people in the 60s sitting in the TNT area all night because once some people saw something in the TNT area. They still came for years afterwards to the TNT area, and some of the people into witchcraft and the black arts were obviously in the TNT area because they put graffiti on in the buildings and stuff. But Mothman may have been a very temporary thing, just like most of the Bigfoot sightings are.
I noticed I found a couple of Buddhist paintings, really old, and they had the Garuda floating above the Buddha.
Right.
Do you have any knowledge of how the Buddhists feel about it? It's like he's a deity of some kind.
Well, it may be that just when they saw it, they thought it was a spiritual thing. It was so different, and so they included it in their spiritual drawings and paintings. As you know, in Indonesia, they have belief in the Garuda going way back. The American Indians have believed in the Thunderbird for generations. And in some cases they thought the Thunderbird was very dangerous, would attack you, which may be true, because if you get attacked by a giant creature like that, there's not going to be any evidence left of the attack. It's going to carry you away and eat you.
Sort of like in Braxton County, you were saying that some teenagers were missing.
They had a lot of disappearances of teenagers in those days. And they were hitchhiking because hitchhiking used to be legal, and that was the way kids got around. And they would go out they were hitchhiking to the football game, say, and never show up. And the police at that time tried to keep it as quiet as they could, which they always do. We had things happen here in Point Pleasant that they tried to keep quiet. So that annoys them, especially when someone like me shows up. And
we found that the waterways in West Virginia seem to be where most of the sightings have occurred. You can follow the Ohio back to the Kanawha, back to the Elk. And do you think there's something about water that aids this process?
Water and blood. In the Mothman days, they seem to have a real interest in blood. And It's also sort of a taboo subject, especially if you're being interviewed for television. They don't want to talk about that. They usually are waiting for me to say something really sensational. So in a 2-hour interview, they can take 30 seconds and put that on the air.
Well, we're going to put the whole thing in there, so we'll get
well,
but that's it for my questions, unless Harriet's got a couple.
I'm just fascinated.
Well, we've got so many mysteries on our hands. It's better to be normal and not pay any attention to mysteries.
Are you still actively investigating?
No, not actively, because we had a bunch of sightings of Bigfoot up in the Catskill Mountains 2 or 3 years ago. And the only reason I went up there was my informant was one of the game wardens, the people who watch for forest fires and things. And we had the very good witnesses, and whatever these things are, they vanished as fast as they came. I've had reports where witnesses have seen a Bigfoot, and the Bigfoot would reach down to the ground, and he would catch the hand of another Bigfoot and pull it up out of the ground, the solid ground, and the two of them would walk away. So that's a pretty good indication right there that it's something other than an animal that we're watching. We're watching the behavior of a paraphysical object.
Well, I had a Bigfoot. I never saw it, but I was in the Catskills once in the early '80s camping, and I got this frightening chill, and I was very sure that it was some kind of a Bigfoot, and that was on Bear Mountain. I don't know where you're.
I know Bear Mountain. Yeah, it was near there. Yeah,
it was.
Yeah. You just got the chill.
Yeah.
See, some people just see 2 red eyes in the woods, and it scares the hell out of them. And experienced people who camp out all the time, and these 2 huge red eyes the size of a dinner dish will appear in the woods. They don't see any form besides that, but they're terrifying, whatever they are. And the Mothman, they always reported that it had these red eyes.
I have a friend who had the red eyes in his bedroom. Interviewed him for this film, and he said the bed started shaking. He saw the red eyes and blanked out and doesn't remember what happened after that.
Well, we had a witness here in Point Pleasant who had seen one of the early witnesses of Mothman, and I went with her into the power plant in the TNT area. And the power plant, is a pretty big place. It had all kinds of stairways, steel stairways, and it was a good place for a Mothman to hide. And she volunteered to go with me into this plant, and she became hysterical, and I didn't see anything, but she claimed she saw the eyes, just the red eyes. She saw something red in there. And we had a policeman standing outside the plant while we were in there, and he wouldn't go in there. And I was such an idiot then. Fearless John Keel, because I was convinced I was right and the world was wrong, and therefore nothing was going to happen to me. Proven over and over again.
Well, that power plant story reminds me of Gray Barker's Silver Bridge book, where he has a couple of chapters in there where he describes himself as Mothman, it seems.
Well, you have to be very careful with Gray Barker.
Well, the thing about it is that, though, I've had, before I read that, I had this sense that these strange dreams I have where I'm flying around and people see me and they're afraid of me made me think that since I had made this contact with Mothman, that I was somehow experiencing his reality. And I felt like Barker was tapping into that idea. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of out there, but I wondered if...
Did you ever meet Gray?
I did not.
Gray was a very complex person. He had a very good sense of humor. He was very intelligent. And all of his books were fiction. he would make up these terrible books, and he'd only sell knew he had a market of 2,000 people who were going to buy these books, and so he would print them himself of 2,000 copies, and probably had some tax angle working too. He was a manager of a movie theater, for real, and he wrote these books because he must have had a lot of time on his hands. In that book, The Silver Bridge, there's a chapter about me in there, and he sent me his version of the chapter, and I rewrote the whole thing because his chapter was full of bullshit, and I rewrote it and told it exactly the way it all happened. And he used my version in Silver Bridge. But, you know, he has people flying around in flying saucers and Indrid Cold and all that, and he was just making it up and having some fun. And if you read some of his other books, you'll see that if you read his famous book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, if you read it carefully, you can see that there's a point where he sort of gives up and starts fictionalizing. He's dealing with the Flatwoods Monster, first of all. That was his first real interesting case. And then he goes downhill, and then he just says, to hell with it, and he throws in everything. And that book was so popular, a copy of it was found in the home of the people who committed suicide.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like the Indrid Cold story is kind of bogus, or?
Yeah.
Really?
Derenberger was another complex character. He was a pathological liar, to put it simply. And his daughter called me a couple of years ago, was very upset that some TV show had done something about him. And he had given the whole thing up in the 70s or 80s and moved to Ohio. And people were always writing to me. They wanted to contact Derenberger because they wanted to contact Indrid Cold. Indrid Cold became a real entity to them through the book.
What about the people that said they saw the aircraft parked next to the interstate? Do you think there's a part of it that's real and then it was just built on?
I think his original story had some substance to it, because he was scared enough to go to the police. Mm-hmm. And nobody's going to go to the police with a bogus story. They might come to me or you with a bogus story, but they're not going to go to the cops. And also, at that time, two people who lived outside of Point Pleasant, two men who lived outside of Point Pleasant, had pretty much the same experience. And they were going to report it, and their son came by and talked them out of it, because I knew all the details and was going to use some of it in a book or article or whatever I was doing then, and they got talked out of it.
Switching gears, just thought of a question. It sounds like you have a sense that we need to change direction, and as a civilization, do you have a soundbite, I guess, or a mantra that you have for how to start that process of how to get?
And it would take somebody with great leadership ability to have any effect. And of course, as you know, the Bible and all these other Nostradamus and everybody are predicting that a man is going to come out of the Middle East and start this process going. And so we're over there bumping off all the Arab leaders we can find.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the old Sumerian tablets are over there being destroyed, I would guess. You know.
Well, that's another habit we have of destroying so many of these ancient artifacts. When we finally arrived at Eastern Island, they had a lot of writings carved into wood, because that's all they had was trees there. And the early explorers and destroyed all of the writings. Of course, it would have been a job to interpret them. It's like cracking the hieroglyphs, but those slabs of wood should have been safely stored somewhere.
Do you have any questions for me? If you were interviewing a person who comes up 30 years later and says, "Well, I had this experience, but
why are you doing this? Why are you still obsessed with this? You've got to explore your inner self."
Yeah, and I think that having spent a couple of years really interviewing people and traveling and looking into it, I have come a long way with it.
Well, this happens to many of the people who get involved. People who would never think in a million years they'd get involved in something like this. It suddenly changes their whole lives, and they don't really understand what's happening to them.
Well, I think for us both, Harriet and I both have gotten into into a holistic healing.
Right.
We both do other things. We have a lot of synchronicities in our lives, even though we haven't seen each other. We saw each other only once in 30 years. We had the same job as loading jets,
Really?
cargo jets. We had the same job, and she was one of maybe the only 10 women in the world to do that job.
That's
And
really interesting.
but now we've totally switched our thing, and we're doing something that's helps heal and helps. Just I think makes a difference in a good way. So.
Well, it has opened up the minds of many people, especially in terms of astronomy and people starting to look at the stars that never looked at them before, thinking about the things that. There's a very good book that's been a bestseller for the last 5 or 6 years. It's called The Elegant Universe. And I always recommend that as a starting point for somebody who wants to get... You've got to understand the universe a little bit before you can get into this other stuff. And we've had people chasing birds that are not bird experts. They're not even hunters who know anything about birds. We have people chasing Loch Ness who don't know a damn thing about fish. I'd study the forms in the ocean and all before I'd really get into serious about Loch Ness. Of course, now the British government has come out with a very firm statement saying they have spent a lot of money at Loch Ness and there's nothing there. Well, that convinces all these people, there's something there, let's go immediately. So
would you say that your reason for getting into this originally was sort of the same, a self journey?
Well, it started when I was very young. I had a very bad childhood. My mother and father parted when I was about 3 years old, and in a sense, I'm an orphan who raised myself. And I was reading my own books and reading books that on many subjects, and by the time I was 17, I was really on my own, all by myself. I came to New York with 75 cents, and it never occurred to me that this was a very dangerous thing to do. I just knew that I had to be in New York, and this was where I was supposed to be. And, New York has been my home really ever since, even though I've traveled all the time. I keep going back to New York. And I met a lot of fascinating people in New York itself and around the world. And Shirley MacLaine is probably doing this, or she's not doing it much anymore, but she opened a lot of minds, I think, with her somewhat odd philosophy. But people would listen to it, and it would open their minds to things they'd never thought about before.
Well, I think your book, certainly did the same thing. When I ran across it in '93, it totally put it all together for me, or at least it got me thinking I wasn't crazy,
right,
like you were saying.
And that was, a carefully done book. That was my intention. I really aimed that book at people who'd had experiences, whether it was experiences with Big Bird or Small Bird or Loch Ness or whatever. And I've heard from thousands of them since that they know that they're not crazy, and they know that they're learning. It's a shame that the whole world doesn't go through a learning process, but they don't. It's only a small percentage.
I don't know. I've run out of bad advice to give people. I think so much of it is hopeless. We'll never know. For example, people have been chasing ghosts since the beginning of time, since 5,000 years ago. And we really don't know that much about ghosts. You know, there are many, many theories about returning dead people and so on, but it's really hard to, well, what would be rapping on the wall in a 12-year-old boy? Maybe it's something inside me, an energy inside me that was trying to come out then. We're doing more studies now of the human being than we've ever done before. And that's an important step. We've got to learn a lot more about the human being and why young men willingly go off to war and why we do these stupid things. This planet has so much on it that has to be explored. Billions of life forms on this planet in every shape and form. There are plants 200 miles down in the ocean. There are all kinds of strange things in the deserts. There are things that life can adjust to anything, and has on this planet. In the oceans itself, we've got millions of life forms, and they survive by eating each other. We've got birds everywhere, and they survive either by eating all the insects and worms, or by eating each other. If you ever watch a hawk dive down on a bird, he's taking the bird home for dinner. That's the way nature has worked it out. We go out and we hit a cow in the head with a sledgehammer. They have improved methods now. That's why in science they all specialize. And it's the same with writers. Like Mark Twain would go out and write about everything. A writer today is just going to write about, unfortunately, a lot of politics. A lot of people waste their lives writing about politics. You go back and read the political writings of 10 years ago. You say, why did they bother? And none of it was true. None of it happened. You know, we were fighting the Cold War for 20 or 30 years. But when you get to be my age, it looks not hopeless, but very difficult. We have the big problem of education. How do you educate people for the world to come? Where is it all going to end? One day something will fall out of the sky, hit the earth, and burn it to a cinder.